Feudal Japan. While the feudal period was going on, the military rule started to take over. The emperor's rule was restricted to religious matters only. Feudalism in Japan went from the 12th century to the 19th century. Its military-led warrior culture emerged partly in response to the threat of the Mongol invasions in the 13th century. The emperor was similar to a king, but in Japan he was also a religious leader. There are three main social classes in feudal Japan. They were the royal class, the noble class, and the lower class. Approximately 90% of the society belonged to the lower peasant classes, with the rest being in the noble military class.
A civil war broke out in 1336 that ended the full power that the emperor previously had. So in turn, the emperor sent armies of what became known as samurai to fight the civil war for him, and when they came back, he gave the title shogun to the leader of the army, so they wouldn't attempt to take him over as the emperor. This began a new form of control in Japan, where the leaders of different armies controlled smaller pieces of land, rather than one emperor controlling everything, and this is called feudalism. During the feudal age of Japan, the biggest invasions were called Mongol invasions. These were considered the biggest battles involving feudal Japan, especially considering there weren't many wars. The invasions of Japan took place in 1274 and 1281. The goal was to conquer the Japanese islands after the fall of Korea. The attempts were basically useless though.
From the beginning of Japanese civilization until 1185, an emperor ruled all of Japan. When it comes to feudal Japan's social hierarchy, there are lots of things that are significantly different from today's society in Japan. For example, merchants and artists in feudal Japan were considered at the very bottom of the hierarchy. The shogun was the highest class in the noble class. Shoguns were also the military and political leader of feudal Japan and held the most power. The shoguns were appointed by the emperor and simply meant general. However, the shoguns gained the highest title due to their physical strength. Daimyos, also known as feudal warlords, were categorized just below and reported directly to the shogun, making them also very powerful rulers. Daimyos were in fact more powerful than the shoguns at times. However strong the shoguns completely depended on how many daimyo they had underneath them. They had lots of advantages over the others. For instance, they were exempt from paying taxes. Out of 40 emperors in the feudal Japan period, there were only two empresses. The term empress was used to describe a female ruler in the emperor position. Another term used to describe female emperors were hosai tenno, which is a direct translation for female emperor. It was relatively rare for a woman to become a tenno.
The social hierarchy of feudalistic Japan was made up of classes: the royal class, the noble class, and the underclass. The royal class was made up of the emperor, the primary king and religious leader of feudalistic Japan, and the royal family. The noble class was made up of daimyos, samurais, and ronins. The shogun was the commander-in-chief of the daimyos. He was kind of above the noble class. The daimyos were the great lords of the noble class, vassals to the emperor. Samurais were the military under the daimyos, which went through rigorous training. Ronins were like samurais but had no masters and were wanderers. Samurais became a ronin if their master died or fell from power. The lower class was made up of the working class. Peasants were poor farmers and made their living by selling goods. Artisans were skilled tradesmen and worked with their hands. Merchants supplied merchandise to trades.
Daimyo with their armies of samurai battled for control throughout the medieval period, so this was an era of perpetual warfare. Despite that, Japan's economy actually grew at this time. New innovations in agriculture and technology allowed for more productive farms, merchants, and trade with more China and Korea. And artisans found plenty of daimyo to support their crafts. There was a social hierarchy with only those of the aristocratic classes being able to own property. Each daimyo controlled a specific territory and gave fiefs or parcels of land to his vassals. So either you owned land as a noble or you worked land as a peasant. Jobs in feudal Japan were influenced by different classes and ranks. Japanese people mainly had jobs to earn money and raise their families. These jobs varied from emperors, rulers, and court nobles down to masons, blacksmiths, and fishermen. People who sold goods were named merchants. Merchants were ranked the lowest of all classes socially. Merchants in Japan weren't seen as high-class people as they were often accused of cheating. Most merchants only sold one specific item. Some, however, sold more than one item, even though merchants were looked down upon. In society, they provided a great contribution to Japan's structure and economy. Merchants sold goods such as paper, tea, silk, and fabrics. Trade was conducted by interpassing private merchants or even an auction.
In ancient times, the Japanese believed that all natural phenomena, animals, and plants possessed divine power. This belief came to be known as the Shinto and was established as an official religion after Buddhism and Confucianism were introduced to Japan from the Asian continent. The main religions are Shinto and Buddhism. They wouldn't let some religions in Japan. In Japan, the only religions they would let are Shinto, Buddhism, and the new religion. Shinto and Buddhism ritual coexisting side by side with the increasing influence from other religions.